All right, Peanut Gallery, Heckling from the hard camera. Let's go.
All right. Well, so the reason I wanted to bring up Hulk Hogan in TNA specifically is because I think that there's a lot of parallels that we can draw between the way in which Hulk Hogan used his influence, his political influence in the wrestling community, and what's occurring today with certain aspects of AEW's booking. And the reason I wanted to bring up Hulk Hogan specifically is because this is also something that he did hearkening back to the days of WCW when he did a lot of the same tactics. Now, TNA, in 2000, he came in like 2009, I believe.
Yeah, 2009.
Was when he came in. TNA was pretty much the second biggest wrestling promotion in the United States at that point in time. Obviously, AEW didn't exist yet. Ring of Honor was very close number 3, but as far as TV contracts, they did a great contract. They had a great audience. They were making a lot of great moves. They had a lot of good backing, that sort of thing. But when they brought in Hulk Hogan, they brought in Eric Bischoff as well. And that's kind of the first major thing that I want to talk about too, is who Hulk Hogan brings in when he I guess started this whole campaign.
He surrounds himself with his friends.
He does, and it's very much a clique, and it's a very old school way of looking at the wrestling industry. Obviously, we don't see a lot of that anymore, but Hulk Hogan very much stuck to bringing in Hulk. It's never just Hulk Hogan. It's always Hulk Hogan and somebody else.
It's always Hulk Hogan and a collective of friends. So you
Right.
have, Scott Hall, you have X-Pac, you have
Kevin
Kevin
Nash,
Nash,
you
you
have
have
Eric
Bischoff,
Bischoff.
you have Bubba the Love Sponge, because remember, he was also hired on.
Right, you had Mick Foley from time to time as well.
Right, now, there are some wrestlers that Hulk Hogan did give a lot of credence to. He really liked AJ,
Yeah.
so he kept him strong in the main event scene. He brought in Ric Flair.
Ric Flair too.
Yep, Rob Van Dam. He brought in Rob because Hulk Hogan really liked Rob Van Dam. So the one thing with Hogan, it's Hogan's thing within TNA and his thing with WCW are different, only in the context of he was not in creative. Hulk Hogan had creative control over his character.
Right. That's why I only wanted to do the TNA.
Right.
Because it was a little bit different with TNA because he actually did exert creative control over that process.
Right.
So that's why we're going to talk about his booking styles. And again, Hulk Hogan favors his friends. He obviously brings in friends with him, which at the time it was okay. I didn't see any issues with it at the time that they were bringing in Hulk Hogan because TNA was pretty strong as a promotion. Mm-hmm. But it was really this era that brought about its downfall.
Oh yeah. Here's the thing. People wanted to watch the alternative to WWE.
Right.
And when Hogan came in,
It was the alternative.
No, it was not the alternative. It was WWE Light.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Because a lot of the originals were not there. The X Division was basically totally ignored, which was ridiculous.
They brought in the four-sided ring.
It felt like every other promotion where before it was not that.
There were characters and storylines and match types and things that were just not that were just not in WWE.
Right. And now they are here. And then let's talk about the Eric Bischoff Hulk Hogan thing, because I think that dynamic also hurt the product as a whole.
It did. Because again, they're the ones who are exerting that creative control over the product. And Hulk Hogan will favor his friends over the wrestlers that are already there.
Right.
That is something that he did in WCW. Even though he didn't have creative control, having creative control over your character means that you can face whoever you want and you can go for the title as many times as you want. With this, he had control over the entire roster creatively and put over his friends and people that he brought in at the expense of the TNA originals.
Right, and that was a huge problem for people because, once again, it's WWE Light. When any non-wrestling fan thinks of WWE, the first name that pops into their head is Hulk Hogan.
Right.
Like, almost every single time. Maybe The Rock, maybe Stone Cold,
Right.
or maybe even Cena. But if you talk to somebody like our dad's age, Hulk Hogan.
Right.
He was rocking. He was wrestling.
Yeah.
And now Hogan coming in the first week was very popular. I think he gained like the only million views that they've gotten ever.
Right. But then they brought in a lot of ideas with them, and obviously, we have to talk about what else happened at that time. They were going to Mondays. They were bringing in, and that's Dixie Carter, by the way.
Yeah, right behind my head because.
Yeah. And we'll get to Dixie in a little bit because, but there were a lot of ideas, I guess, that were just coming out of this because they saw themselves as potentially being a viable competition to WWE.
Right.
Let's talk about Dixie Carter because at this point in time too, Dixie Carter became a lot more active in terms of
on-screen characterization,
right, which was a downfall.
Yep. People do not want to see the people making the decisions on camera all the time.
That's what happened with Hulk Hogan, is that he put himself on camera all the time.
Right.
There was like a crew in his office.
Right. Eric Bischoff was in multiple segments throughout the show. Dixie Carter became involved. They did power struggle storyline stuff that was successful in WCW at the time, but the issue is that that's not the culture anymore. People want to see something, maybe a refresh is there. It's not something new. We want a refresh of the past.
Right.
And Hogan doing the same thing with the same people at the same time, dominating like they did in WCW, was not the way to go.
Right.
Because we've already seen that. What else is new?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there were some wrestlers that came out of this era that were a net positive.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, you have Rob Van Dam's world title run. You have AJ Styles, who went to such a different level because he was rubbing shoulders with Ric Flair.
Right.
You had Beer Money doing some of the best work at the time. With Fortune, Bully Ray came up to prominence at this time.
Yeah.
And he, we wouldn't have the Bully Ray that we do now without this era because he was a part of that Fortune stable.
Right.
So, not everything was bad within this time.
But there were definitely a lot of favorites.
There was favoritism. There was a lot of backstage politicking. And there were just the main storylines were Hogan, Bischoff, Fortune,
and all the friends.
And it's like that to me, the undercard was the exciting part of TNA at that time.
Right.
The main event scene was like, okay, you have AJ, but he's facing Rob Van Dam, the heel Jeff Hardy. It's like, well, come on.
Right.
Do something different.
Right. So that really is the big one. And again with Dixie Carter being involved and she really showed her incompetence as far as wrestling goes and she was fine just doing a backstage thing. Just being backstage.
Right. And here's the thing. If Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff stayed backstage, I'm sure they could give great insight to them. But the problem is that they cannot stay outside of the general spotlight if they're involved within a wrestling company.
Right. And that's what led to the failure of TNA in the Monday Night Wars.
Yep.
It was just the same old song and dance that WCW did.
And then WWE have Bret Hart coming back after years and years, shaking hands with Shawn Michaels.
I think at this time WWE scared for maybe like 2 weeks.
They were, and their feathers were peaked a little bit there.
But after week 2, there's this like this is just stupid.
Yeah. No, they were legitimately worried at this time. There was was speculation that this could have been something big, but the problem was that TNA dropped the ball. They legitimately scared WWE.
They had the golden goose.
Right.
Nope.
Because you know why? Because the first 2 weeks, you knew exactly what Hogan was going to be doing, which is what you said. Favoriting his friends, favoriting him. He's in the main event Bound for Glory.
Right.
Nobody can go past him. He's facing Sting.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. Once again, Joker Sting is cool.
But
hindsight 2020.
But, so, I guess we can come up to a conclusion. I think this is my last picture. This is not.
No, there's one more.
Okay, so let's go to that.
That's the press conference.
Yeah, so let's talk about some parallels, because this is kind of what I wanted to end on. Is we're seeing some parallels between what happened during TNA Impact as far as the management being more involved goes, and kind of what we're seeing today with.
Not nearly as bad. Scott D'Amore is doing very well.
No, I'm not talking I'm not talking about Scott D'Amore. I'm talking about Tony Khan.
Oh yes. Well,
he is starting to become a little more involved on screen.
He's only been out there for big announcements. That's the only time that he's been on camera, and if he continues to do that, then we're okay.
I think that let's talk about, because in general, when you're management, you don't spend time outside of just managing.
You can do it in a way that is fine. Once again, Tony Khan is doing it well. He's only coming out for the big announcements. He's not involved in storylines. He's not involved in storylines. He's only there in a business capacity, which is exactly where he needs to be.
Right.
Mr. McMahon is a little involved with Austin Theory, but it's not the main event.
Well, that's true.
And it's not the main focus. It's a segment within the show. That's
true.
A different situation. And then with Scott D'Amore, he was only there because there was a tie-in with Josh Alexander. It was very minimal.
Right.
He knows that it's a problem.
Right, but I think this raises another issue. This raises, I think, a point that we're trying to see is how much management on screen is too much management on screen.
I think, right, with Hulk Hogan, because, Dixie Carter was, once again, at this time, she was not on camera all the time. It's like you knew about Dixie Carter.
You knew she was. She was the president of TNA, but she was out of the limelight.
Right, she was out of the limelight. She was not involved within creative at that time. Mm-hmm. So she had the final say for the most part, but at the same time, she put her trust in, albeit questionable people, but she put it in the trust of people who had years of experience.
Yeah.
And she was just funding it. Well, her dad was, but that's beside the point. She was a middleman.
Right.
Now, at this rate, you're right. She became more involved with Dixieland. She was the main event because she had that. And once again, we had Magnus in his world title run, which we did not know the capabilities of him until then. He was still green, but once again, you saw something there. We didn't know what the issue was. But then, the thing with AJ Styles was fun. I liked that whole thing about him. Now, him leaving was not good, but the rivalry of him leaving was fine. Bully Ray being the main event scene, the main event player that he was. You get a tit for tat with Hogan in TNA. And, living through the entire thing for Peanut Gallery and I, fond memories of some and bad for others, but it's always a testament on over-egging the authority pudding.
Yes.
And you don't do that. The authority, let's talk about the authority too. Management in main event story, that was too much.
Right.
Now, luckily, it didn't hurt anybody.
But it was there. And
right.
It was very common in the 2000s to have management in, I think it comes in waves, to have management in storylines.
Yep.
But what is the appetite for it these days is very, very minimal. We don't want authority in major storylines today, but in 5 years that could change. It's just a matter of what, obviously Hulk Hogan in TNA should be a sign of caution. It's a cautionary tale.
It really is.
Mixing the storylines in with the creative control.
I agree. I can agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's all I got.
All right. So when we come back, I am going to be talking about, very briefly, the history of the inactive championships within TNA.